Merry Christmas! This is Gordo, and it's that time of the year again. That's right, time for another one of my Christmas tapes. Now, a lot of people have been asking me just why I make these tapes. So for those of you who might be new on my mailing list, and those of you who maybe just can't remember, which is okay too, let me give a brief history. 7 years ago, I went shopping for Christmas cards, and I decided that none of them reflected what I really felt about Christmas. So I decided to make a cassette tape instead. I set out to wrap up all my feelings about Christmas in a neat little package and mail it to my friends. Of course, I was a bit more idealistic back in those days. But now things have come a long way since that first tape. For one thing, the tapes themselves have gotten a lot better. At least I think so, and I spend a lot more time making them. Back in 1986, my tape took me a whole afternoon to make. This year's will take me almost a month. Also this year, I'll send out 5 times as many tapes as I did that first year. So I guess that means I have a lot more friends than I used to. But you know what? The one thing that hasn't changed is my reason for making these tapes. After 7 years, I'm still trying to express my feelings about Christmas. Every year I think I've said everything I feel, then another year passes and I have to start all over again. And besides, it's the one time of the year that I actually get to have fun in the studio. But enough history for now, because I have a great story for you this year. So gather up the kids, throw another log on the fire, and pour yourself a glass of your favorite Christmas cheer. Now turn up the volume and settle back, because live and in hi-fi stereo, this is my Christmas card. Now this is an elf story. No, not necessarily a story about elves, although it does have a few elves in it. But it's a story told to me by the elves. Oh, I can hear it now. You're probably saying, "Come on, Gordo, you don't really expect us to believe that you talk to elves." But it's true. This actually is a story that the elves told me last summer while I was at the North Pole fly fishing with Santa Claus. But there's a few things that you have to know about elf stories. Mainly, that they tend to exaggerate just a bit. I mean, for such little people, the elves have been known to tell some pretty tall tales. Of course, I believe them. I mean, how could you not believe a story told to you by one of Santa's elves? And this story was personally told to me by Percy, the head cook at the North Pole. And besides, no one ever believes my stories either. It all began a long, long time ago. Hundreds of years ago, just after the invention of television, and long before the Wright brothers took that famous first flight in a 747 over Kitty Hawk. In fact, it was long before any of us living today were even born. Now it was a cold, dark night in mid-December, and Santa and his elves were having a meeting to plan their upcoming Christmas Eve run.
We don't go south. Everything's south. Up the North Pole. Man, what are you doing? I think you're right. We don't go west. It's not dirty out west. We can't go west.
Now they were having a heated discussion on which direction to begin their journey. Of course, they have this discussion every year, and they always decide to go south, which is something I've never understood because from the North Pole, every direction is south. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Now this startled everyone present because they don't get many strangers at the North Pole. In fact, no one except maybe myself even knows where Santa's workshop is. And they knew it wasn't me because I wasn't born yet. Now Irving, that Santa's accountant, went to answer the door.
What? Hold on, I'm coming. Wait a minute, hold your horses. Dear me. Oh no, not you.
And there at the door, standing about 10 feet tall and meaner than Ebenezer Scrooge himself, stood Old Man Winter.
Where's Santa Claus? I want to see that foolish old elf.
Now this might be a good time to stop and talk for a few minutes about the North Pole. You see, the North Pole is really a pretty big place, and it's inhabited by more than just a few interesting characters. Now, what you and I think of as Santa Claus's North Pole is really just Happy Valley, which is where Santa has his workshop. Now, it's a tiny valley hidden deep in the mountains of the North Pole, and everyone there is happy. I mean, how could you work for someone like Santa Claus and not be happy? But outside the valley, not everyone is so happy. And this is the case with Old Man Winter. That's right, I'm talking about the very same Old Man Winter that comes screaming past your window on north winds every year about this time. Now, he lives on a mountain overlooking Happy Valley, in a cave carved out of solid ice. And believe me, Old Man Winter is not someone that you would want to have for a neighbor. Well, he's the reason it's always so cold at the North Pole. In fact, I don't think it can ever be cold enough for Old Man Winter. And just as everyone in Santa's Valley is always happy, well, Old Man Winter is just the opposite. He's never happy. Never happy with the weather, never happy with anything. And when it comes to Christmas and Santa Claus, he's the original bah humbug. Now, Old Man Winter doesn't make very many visits down to Santa's Valley. But whenever he does, it always spells bad news.
Oh, Mr. Winter, come in. What brings you down to my little valley?
I didn't come here for pleasantries, Claus. I see you and your mangy elves are up to your holiday foolishness again.
Why, yes, Mr. Winter. Christmas is only 10 days away, and we've got lots of work to do. It seems like we can never get caught up at this time of year.
Well, it's going to stop, Claus. All this hammering and banging is keeping me awake nights. I'm telling you, I want it to stop.
I apologize, Mr. Winter, but we have all these toys to finish, and the elves and I have been putting in a little overtime. But I promise that in just a few short days, it'll be all over for another year.
Not good enough, Claus. I'm going to put a stop to it once and for all. This year, I've got a little holiday gift of my own. I'm going to make the biggest storm ever. It'll snow so hard, you won't be able to deliver all those stupid toys. I'm going to make it snow 10, maybe 20 feet. And not just here at the North Pole, but everywhere. Just think about all those people who have been hiding from me all these years, living in their little tropical hideaways. I can't wait to see the look on their faces when they wake up tomorrow morning and see my blizzard. A little Christmas gift from Old Man Winter. And no Christmas gift from Santa Claus. And not just this year, but every year until you give up this nonsense of yours.
I don't quite know what to say, Mr. Winter. Please, I ask you to reconsider. Think of all the people whose lives will be affected. We have the sleigh and the reindeer, and we're used to getting around in all the snow and ice you keep piled up here at the pole. But for most people, life will come to a stop. If you have a problem with me, Mr. Winter, take it up with me. But please, leave the rest of the world out of it.
How's that for a little Christmas cheer, Claus?
And with an icy blast, Old Man Winter was gone. Santa looked outside, and sure enough, it had started to snow. And not just flurries, but flakes as big as your hand. A quiet hush overtook Santa's workshop. The elves were afraid to speak. Everyone looked to Santa to see what he would do. But he only hung his head and very slowly, very quietly left the room. All over the world, newspapers called it the storm of the century. Why, some even called it the storm of the millennium. Countless scientists went on countless TV talk shows and talked of a coming ice age. But everywhere, people were forced to stay inside and only hope it would quit snowing. Store owners and shopkeepers looked sadly at their empty cash registers. And all over the world, a sense of gloom began to set in as people everywhere realized that Christmas, that season of cheer and goodwill, might have to be canceled. The news reports were unbelievable. 25 feet of snow in New York City, 30 feet in Los Angeles, and in Hawaii, Only the tops of the palm trees could be seen above 40 feet of snow, and still the snow continued to fall. A full week passed, and there was no end in sight. Houses were all but buried under a blanket of white, and in the cities, life came to a virtual standstill. Yes, it certainly appeared that Old Man Winter would have his way and destroy Christmas. Now, meanwhile, at the North Pole, things were very gloomy. Santa almost never came out of his office, and no one had spoken to him since the night of Old Man Winter's visit. The elves had taken it upon themselves to finish the toy production. There was virtually no way the toys could ever be delivered, but they didn't know what else to do. So they worked on day after day, hammering as quietly as they could. Although it really didn't matter, there was no way Old Man Winter could have heard them now. You see, by this time, Santa's workshop was buried under almost 100 feet of snow. But most of all, the elves just worried about Santa Claus. No one had ever seen him like this. Why, even bringing Rudolph into the workshop from the stable didn't cheer him up. Now, some of the elves had busied themselves by digging a tunnel to get the sleigh and reindeer out on Christmas Eve. But unless it quit snowing, there was no way Santa could fly. There just wasn't anything to do but wait and hope. Now, it just so happened that working in Santa's stable was a young elf named Seymour. He was the smallest elf at the North Pole and a favorite of the reindeer, and this was to have been his very first Christmas working for Santa. Needless to say, he wasn't very happy with the current situation. While he did everything he could to cheer everyone up, in fact, it had been his idea to take Rudolph into Santa's office. But nothing seemed to work. The overall mood at the North Pole was very somber, to say the least, and there was just nothing he could do about it. So he had an idea. He would take matters into his own hands. Something had to be done. Tomorrow would be Christmas Eve, and time was running out. So very early on that Christmas Eve morning, before anyone else woke up, he hopped on Rudolph's back, and using the tunnel that had been dug, rode out into the heart of the blizzard, headed for Old Man Winter's mountain home. The storm was much worse than Seymour had expected. The wind was so strong that he had to use his belt to tie himself onto Rudolph's back. It was snowing so hard they couldn't fly, and the visibility was so bad that Seymour could just barely see Rudolph's glowing red nose only 2 feet away. So together they trudged through the snow on a mission to save Christmas, relying only on faith and Rudolph's magic to find Old Man Winter's home. For hours they went on like this, and the closer they got to the mountain, the worse the storm got. Now Seymour began to realize just how angry Old Man Winter was. But why would he be this upset over such a little thing as elves hammering, thought Seymour. Surely there must be something else, but what could it be? Why was Old Man Winter this upset? Now, Rudolph's magical sense of direction was not dampened by the blizzard, and finally, after many hours of slowly moving through the storm, they reached the entrance to Old Man Winter's cave. Now, Seymour had actually begun to have second thoughts about this visit. You see, he had not really thought about what he was going to say when he was actually face-to-face with Old Man Winter. But it was a little late for that now, and besides, he didn't really know if they could make it back to Santa's workshop. And at the present moment, all he wanted to do was get into the cave and out of the storm. As soon as he entered the cave, Seymour realized that there was one very important thing missing, namely Old Man Winter himself. Now, Seymour was at the same time relieved and disappointed. Relieved because, well, he was very afraid, and disappointed because that meant that his trip through the storm had been for nothing. But at least he was safely, if only for the moment, out of the storm. Now, as he looked around the cave, Seymour was a little surprised. It seems Old Man Winter was actually a fairly decent housekeeper, and even if the cave lacked warmth, it did have a certain hominess to it. In fact, there was even some evidence that Old Man Winter enjoyed fine art. You see, hanging over the couch on a wall of solid ice was a portrait of Elvis Presley, painted on the finest black velvet that Seymour had ever seen. Surely this Old Man Winter must be a reasonable person, thought Seymour. But he was so busy snooping around the cave, that he didn't hear the quiet warning signal from Rudolph at the cave's entrance. And all of a sudden, with a rush of cold wind, in blew a very angry Old Man Winter.
And what have we here? One of Santa's spies, perhaps?
Oh, no.
Snooping around my cave, trying to find a way to end my wonderful storm? Well, we'll see what Santa has to say when I send you back frozen solid in a block of ice. A little elf on ice. I'll teach him to send spies to my home.
No. Wait, Mr. Winter. You've got it all wrong. Santa didn't send me. He doesn't even know I'm here. I came on my own.
Oh, is that a fact?
Oh, yes, it's true. Santa didn't send me. In fact, he hasn't even spoken to me or anyone else since you started this storm. We've never seen him like this. You're destroying him. Christmas is his whole life. Please, stop it before it's too late.
This is fantastic! I'm destroying Santa Claus. If only I'd known it was this easy. All these years I've had to put up with him, and now I'm going to be rid of him. And I'm having fun at the same time.
No, Mr. Winter. You can't go through with this.
Give me one good reason why I shouldn't. For as long as I can remember, whenever wintertime rolls around, people just think about Santa Claus. Do they ever think about Old Man Winter, other than to curse my name? No, they're too busy getting ready for Christmas. Well, I'm going to change that. I'll have my own holiday, and you'll see how soon they forget about Christmas and Santa Claus. And if you elves are nice to me, maybe I'll let you come work for me. At half wages, of course.
Oh, now I understand. You must really hate Santa Claus. I didn't think you'd get this upset just because of the noise.
Oh, I suppose I don't really hate him. I'm not really that bad of a person. But he just needs to understand that winter is my season. Let him do his thing in the summer. I have no problem with that.
Have you ever talked to Santa about this? I mean, I really don't think Santa's trying to step on your toes or anything like that. He's just trying to help people celebrate Christmas. And Christmas just happens to be in the winter, you see? Well, besides, Christmas is a whole lot more than just Santa Claus. It's about giving and sharing and hey, that's it.
What?
That's it. Sharing. If you could share a little of Santa's goodwill, maybe you could be part of Christmas too. When people think of Christmas, not only would they think of Santa Claus and reindeer and stuff like that, but they would think of you. They'd think about snow and snowmen and I'll bet your pal Frosty would like that.
That's not a bad idea. With a little marketing, they might actually like snow for Christmas. Of course, that means they would have to get all bundled up to go sing their Christmas songs.
You mean carols?
Who?
Carols. Christmas songs are called Christmas carols.
Oh, how strange. But what makes you think Santa Claus will go along with it?
Oh, well, Santa won't mind if you celebrate Christmas. In fact, he wants you to. It's not like he's got any exclusive rights on the holiday or anything like that. He just tries to be an example of giving. That's why people love him. You know, if you two could get together, you could be an example of understanding and cooperation. Maybe people would start to like you, too. Well, or maybe at least they wouldn't hate you so much.
And so Old Man Winter stopped the blizzard and personally carried Seymour and Rudolph back to Santa's workshop. Once there, he and Santa sat down in front of the fireplace and drank eggnog and worked things out. And although Old Man Winter thought Santa kept the workshop a little too warm for his liking, he decided that Santa Claus wasn't such a bad guy after all. In fact, the two of them became fast friends. And that night, to the great joy of the whole world, Santa Claus made his rounds just as he had for hundreds of years. Only this Christmas Eve, he had a couple of passengers with him in the sleigh. Seated next to Santa and having the time of his life was Old Man Winter, howling like the north wind. And way up front, hanging tightly on to Rudolph's back, rode the North Pole's new ambassador to the United Nations, Seymour the Elf. And from that year on, wintry scenes became a part of every Christmas. Frosty the Snowman had a hit song written about him. as did Rudolph. And Old Man Winter finally gained the respect he deserved when Hollywood made the movie White Christmas. Well, there you have it. Those elves sure can tell a story, can't they? And you know, I'm thinking that there's probably a lot of you that don't believe that all of this actually happened. In fact, there may even be someone who thinks that I made it up, like I could really make up something like that. But you know what? I believe their story. And furthermore, I think that the elves had a good reason to tell it to me, because there's a real Christmas message in there. Now, you know, yesterday I was at the mall starting my Christmas shopping, and I suddenly realized that for too many of us, Christmas just means shopping and colored lights and decorated trees. And of course, Santa Claus. But if that's all it means, then I think we're sadly missing the point. Because it's really all about peace and understanding. And I think that's what the elves were getting at with their story. Now, I'm willing to bet that just like Old Man Winter, each and every one of us has someone that we dislike for some reason or another. Maybe it's the way they dress or the way they talk. And that's not to mention the more serious problems like the color of their skin or their religion. But more often than not, it's probably just because we don't understand them. Now, Christmas is a time to spend with family and friends. But this year, try getting together with that certain person that you don't get along with. Share a meal or an eggnog and talk. Who knows, you just might make a new friend. And I think that if each and every one of us could do that this Christmas, then we'd be a whole lot closer to understanding the words, peace on earth and goodwill to men. After all, that's the real meaning of Christmas. Merry Christmas to all, and to all, good night.